this breakdown, this is the axis, the axis right here, right? This is our north-south, and this is parallels, north-south, which is our east-west axis. So over on this side of the axis, you have the parallel systems, and over on this side, you have our Particum systems. Now this is the natural Particum system right here, okay, running vertically on our grid. This is the natural Particum parallel system running on the horizontal grid. Now both of these systems developed a phantom, which is the partially fallen but not Metatronic, partial black hole in the Lyran Elohim Wars 250 billion years ago. When phantom matrix was created here, it was also created there. Now here we have our phantom matrix, which is an imprint taken from Mars. And notice we have our gates. They run bottom is 1, top is 12. This one runs bottom is 1, top is 11. Their 12 is still wiped out. All right. Now the idea was to heal this and bring it back in to our, into full merger with our own unit, to get its own seed atom reset with ours, because it's energy that belonged with this matrix. Same thing over here. This one up here is the phantom parallel. All right. So there's a phantom Earth, but not just a phantom Earth. This goes all the way up the Stargate chain in the universe and the parallel universe. Now, what you have here are the interfaces of the Wysadek. Now, remember, when these are all together, you'd see the Wysadek axis coming through our Cathara this way, and you'd see the phantom coming through this way, right? So when you take them apart, this is what you get when you pull them apart to see what you're looking at. This is the Wysadek black hole system here. And notice how it runs. Its gate 1 is up here. Its gate 11 is down here. It has a mutated, squashed-up little Cathara grid compared to a normal one. And over on this side, you have the Wysadrak parallel fallen black hole system. These guys were one system at one point, and they were completely part of a different Akasha AM matrix. And they interfaced with our matrix and plugged into our phantoms through the Arimathea wormhole, through a wormhole system. This was high science stuff. They were playing with wormholes, and they figured out how to use them really, really well. This is why science now, it's like a good time for a restart, because our scientists are just taking the step back to Atlantis right now, where they're starting to play with stuff that they have no idea what they could unleash. And by the time they figured it out, it would be too late. So it's a good time for the seed atom to be reset and for the big stuff to happen, because it kind of like stops a whole lot of horrid evolution that might have taken place otherwise over again, because it happened in Atlantis as well. So what we have here in this diagram are showing the three systems and their relationship to each other. It shows the Eka axis here that goes with the inner Eka gates. What the Wysadeks are trying to do is they've already forged a bond between these two, and they forged a bond between parallel and phantom. What they want to do is pull everything down into this alignment. So they want to spin everything clockwise and drag it down. Now you have the Wysadrak black hole sitting in the middle of that. If they take these two that are, that go with our matrix, they're going to take them right with us. That's why these guys are a little concerned about the whole thing. And that's why they devised their own retaliation, their own, what they look at as protection from the beast. And they realize that there is no protection from the beast. The only protection from it is the potentiality, as they think, of restraining it and training it yourself. It's not a beast you can destroy, but it's a beast that if you can tame, it will serve you well. That's how they look at it. So they devised a series of implant structures. Now, these are major universal level implant systems that create major stands or flows, just like we have the natural stands that come in when resetting the seed atom. These allow frequency patterns from one system to come up in and activate within another, which allows a temporary blend between those systems. These have been forced in on the Metatronic bond, just like the Wysadeks have done with their systems. That's how the blue sword current was created in the first place. There are a whole set of systems of Metatronic implants all through the universal grids. Now, if the Wysadeks had their way and things worked, they would actually take over the whole beast. They would get under their coding all of the implant systems that the Wysadeks had put in. That's what they're hoping for. They're not going to get that. They know they're not going to get that. And at this point, I don't think any of them know what anybody's going to end up with, but they're all going, oh my God, they're activating the giant, right? You know the story of David and Goliath? Yeah, well, that was another one of those lovely little stories that were twisted, and they meant something else. They never told you that it was a nice giant, and that it was a giant that was here to protect Earth. And they didn't tell you too much about David, whose lineage was coming up from the Leviathan races in an attempted bioregenesis of getting their strands back so they could at least be evac'd out to Terra. So the whole David and Goliath story was about that particular group, which are they weren't the Draconian ones. They were the Wisadek, Anunnaki-based Leviathan races, that line, the Jeshua 9 line, you know, the ones who created the crucifixion story and all that stuff. They were these guys. The story of defeating the giant was they had done things with their implant systems here. In 25,500 BC, they defeated the giant. They stopped those frequencies from running, and they cut off, and they got partial control over the Gate 10 system that Wisadrax had. So these silly stories that we've been told in, like, reading the Bible and all these little fancy stories that are, oh, isn't that nice? The giant fell down, and this little David, oh, see, even the little guys can overpower the big guys, you know. What they didn't tell you is the little guys were the bad guys, and the big guys were actually the good guys in that story. But but the giant only went to sleep, and it's waking up. So, and it's a friendly giant. Now, what we have here are they're geomancies. We've talked about geomancies before, the symbol code patterns that activate very specific frequencies in the shields. Here, running between these gate systems up here. It's easier to show this up here in the little one than to drag it all over here. I could do that too, but it's easier to show it here. This is a pentagram, the 5-pointed star, and it's linking very specific gate combinations. You have the 4-4 here, you have the Azure points here. This links into Tellus, and it's intended to push up and link into there if they can take over. They have the 10 at the center. This is the pentagonal activation of the Wisadrax. This was the first in the series of their series of building grid activations that are meant to culminate in creating the Spear of Destiny by harnessing the blue sword when it comes in. The pentagonal activation is the first one. The second one that activates, and this is already activated. I forget the activation date, so I was going to go into that, but it was, I think it was like, this one was the one in November. This is November 24th, and then right after that, this one activated. This is called the Crescent. Is this one here? It links through 10.5 the whole series of them. There's a whole series of implants that links all of these grids together, and it doesn't have one over here yet, but it has enough momentum, if these are all activated, to swing. If you picture that as a swinging moon, right? This is known as the red moon, because when it hits red, which is the D1 frequency, that means it's downscaled all the way from its D10 and run down all the frequency spectrum. And that's when it carries a punch. That's when it can swing. And what it's intended to do is swing temporarily that way enough to latch onto this and pull the whole bunch of them back up this way. So that's the sign of the crescent. All right, that's a Wisadrak sign as well. Now, the Wisadex were not too happy about the fact that they weren't going to win that easy anymore, so of course they had to come up with some other things to counteract these things. They came up with this thing here. It's called the crescent. It's called the Palladian pulse because it's being run out of gate 5, which is Alcyone in Phantom. All right, see, this is where its little handle is, gate 4 and 5 in Phantom. 4 is our solar gate, Phantom solar gate, that's part of our solar gate. 5 is Alcyone, the Palladian gate, or otherwise known as Terra, Earth's density 2 counterpart. Now, this is a grid configuration that runs up this way. Then it has this very interesting and nasty little hammer, the hammer and the sickle. Yeah, this hammer runs right along the grid lines of the Ark of the Covenant, which is the Eka axis, and it connects into the Wisadrak black hole and into our Phantom, and it connects up here, this part of it, the sickle, connects into Arc Gate 2. It's meant to spin. When this thing starts to spin this way and make its backswing, this thing's supposed to spin in and then bring the whole thing back again and whip it all back this way. These guys are playing board games with the universe. I mean, it's like, this is like something you see on a computer, like, asteroids, where you're like, shoot, all right, I'll swing it this way. No, I'll swing it this way and see what happens, But they're doing it on the three-dimensional universal scale, with three-dimensional holograms. So this is what is activating, actually, this weekend. The Palladian pulse is bringing this thing in here. That's this. Now, we know they have the blue sword current, and that runs, in any Cathar grid, it runs down this way and then across between the 6 and 7, with the Azure, connecting at the Azure point. Now, there's another set of grids that I didn't put them up here yet, because this was the last diagram I was doing, so I got to get this one done before we go, because I wanted to show you where these shapes fit in, because it gives you a clue when you're watching the news as to who might be on what side. This little thing, it's actually called the Sepharath. I think it's Sepharath. That's what it's known as, but here it was called the swastika. There are two kinds, and it's really interesting because the ancient Native American Indians used to use what we would consider a reversed swastika that was reversed compared to the one like facing the different direction than the one that was used by the Hitler regime and those kind of things. They're both part of the same mechanism. They're turnstiles. They run through grids this way. Now let's see. Let's see if I can see it. The shape is this. Down here, you might be able to see it better, like if you look closely on your own, because I have the other ones. I have the cross running through too, and here you see the sickle connected. But on this one, I think you can see it most clear. Gate 10 to gate 8 to gate, where is it? I always get dyslexic with these. I think this one goes this way, and this way. Yeah, so it's like 10, 8, 5, 3. And the other side comes down 9, 6, 7, 4. That's the one that's in Phantom. There's another one in our grids, in our planetary grids, and there's one in Parallel and one in Parallel Phantom. After this activates and sends its frequencies in, and then this activates and sends its frequencies in, then these start to activate. Now again, they're centered at the Azure points, which is where the seed atoms are. One spins one way, one spins the other, and it pulls us into Phantom. It counterclockwise spins us into Phantom. We're supposed to go counterclockwise anyway, but it takes it into a different coding at a different pulse, and it's meant to force an early blend between us and Phantom. Same thing happening up here. And as these progressively activate, it pulls them all together into here. That's their objective, and that's the apparatus that has already begun to activate in the bodies. This is why we're getting like Metatronically infused everywhere these days, because of this thing, because this has accelerated the whole process of bringing in the sword frequencies and all of that. The culmination of all of that would be when the blue sword frequencies are due to come in, which is May 27th at dawn, when the Hitharos starts. These frequencies would blast frequency from here and from the center points of those united grids. It would blast the frequencies in and make it co-combining with the frequencies of the blue sword and begin to push it in to that spin. This would still be active, so they could use it to pull everything right back up into their system. Meanwhile, our bodies are stuck in the middle of this, not to mention our planet and our universe. So it's a very good thing that the temples up here are being activated to send in the three heavenly pillars, or the 3 pillars of heaven. One would be here, one would be here, and one would be here. It is going to sever a lot of those connections to begin with. It's also going to sever the connection to here. Now here, this is the Stonehenge gate, Arc Gate 2. This is where that mess links in. Remember the other diagram where we showed where Wormwood and Nibiru link through the moon and then into Earth? They link into Earth at Stonehenge, which is Ark of the Covenant, Gate 2, because they had access to the Ark of the Covenant in the early days in Atlantis because they were on bioregenesis and we were trying to help them. And they took advantage of that and they took over part of one of the Ark gates and literally had to be cut off from access to the other. There's a wall and time in there too. So this is the mess we're in the middle of. When you look at the symbols, here's another one. The sextant. Here, frequencies running down this way. This is the sign very frequently used by, does that look familiar as a core sign to anybody? Masons, Freemasons, yes. That one belongs to the Weesadex. The Weesadex are the ones who are running the UIR, the United Intruder Resistance. All right. So basically, by looking at some of these basic symbols, it's amazing. If you look, most like dictionaries or map books have like a page in the front that just shows you all the flags, like flags of different countries. I was going to get one. We didn't have time to go, get one and like just pick out which flags we needed to show and that kind of stuff. And we didn't want to do like 10 pages of flags and you go find your own flag, right, and figure out what it is. But the colors in the flags represent frequency bands and combinations of frequency bands. If they run horizontal, they represent one thing. Remember the grids that showed which axis created the horizontal and which created the vertical axes and which were diagonal. You can tell a whole bunch of things about who's running which agenda. It'll probably be an amazing surprise to most of them here that are running it, because they're just being used as puppets. But this one, I believe, is quite predominantly as Russia, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. There's a bunch of them that use a crescent. They don't use it anymore? So that was Soviet Union? Okay. Watch what they changed it to. Yeah. Like, look for signs. If you want to try to figure out who's playing what games, look at what their flags are. And look, too, if they've changed things to see. Did somebody else come into power? Like America was being run by Anunnaki all through the 70s, actually through most of the 60s and 70s and part of the 80s. In the 80s, it started to change hands. And in the 90s, it's being run by the Dracs, and that was fully confirmed when they fudged the election and let Bush into office by messing up with the Florida elections, right? I mean, that was a fiasco when Bush got elected. First, they put on the thing that what's his name? I can't remember his name. Gore was elected. They flashed it on. It was there for like once or twice while you're waiting for the results to come through. It looks like Gore is the winner. All of a sudden, that was totally erased, and this whole thing comes up. No, Mr. Bush is the winner. Just so happened to be that I think it's his brother is the governor of Florida. Yeah. So. Yeah. Yeah, and there was a whole fiasco about missing votes and ballot things not working and things getting lost in the mail and you're not even sending them in the mail, right? Yeah, but they were hell-bent on getting him in office. And this was because of what happened on September 12th of 2000 when the war edict went down. There was an agreement made. All right, now, some of the Dracs decided, okay, we'll join this. It was the Andromi creeps, and they're the ones that are directly affiliated with the Weesadeks. They put everybody together. They don't like anybody either. They don't like Anunnaki, and they don't like Dracs, but they figured, we can use them too. They got them together in the United Intruder Resistance. So there were deals made. And what was going to be an Anunnaki country is now going back to what it was in the 50s, which is a Drac country, the United States. There were little deals made here and there. I don't know what the Anunnaki got in return for that, but it was something they found useful enough to stay in the agreements. So if we just watch just some of these basic symbols, and there's a lot more actually that have to do with like smaller grid configurations, but these are the basic ones, and these are the ones that pushed us in the level 6 evac. It's interesting to observe. I mean, the 5-pointed star, how many does America have? 50 last time I checked. Yeah, and it looks like they're trying to make England the 51st state. So this just gives you a clue as to what the symbols mean. When you pledge allegiance to a flag in school, for instance, when your children are pledging allegiance now in England, they don't have to do that. No, but they have to go to church. In America, we don't have to go to church. We have to say the Pledge of Allegiance. But in England, the kids have to go to church, but they don't have to pledge a flag. They just have to pledge a Bible of some sort. So it's like, what's worse? Well, when you're doing this, what are you saying? When you say something to yourself, I do this, you are making an affirmation. I mean, if you can use tones that activate stuff in your shields, you can use an affirmation that activates, power grids, LTR power grids, activates it in your shields. These are LTR power grids. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. It's like I have nothing against the United States of America, but I prefer to pledge allegiance to God and not flags. And I would honor my country. As long as my country wasn't doing horrible things, then I would just try to go hide someplace like Inner Earth. Personally, I don't want to fight with anybody. But anyway, if you start to see how this stuff has been a part of our cultures all along. The books were taken away, and the direct common knowledge was taken away since the Atlantean house cleaning. But this stuff has been operating all along. You can trace symbols back. Newgrange is a classic one because it has the 3 spirals shapes together, and there's lots of other spirals, I think, too, linked, but there's predominantly 3 groups of 3, which represent the 311 temples that represent the Arc Gates opening, because it was part of it. That was actually one of our sites that got overtaken by the Anunnaki groups when they got control of Stonehenge with that whole wormwood apparatus mess. They got control of the grids up here, too, and they got control of the Newgrange setup, which means they got the control of the Earth's level of the Arc 11 gate. What we're going to do when we go back up there is reopen its security codes, which will put it back to where it's supposed to be. They're not happy about this. This is why once we release the artificial static block that they have on the natural codes there, and the natural pillars come in, it's going to break the link to Stonehenge, which is going to let go of that part of that apparatus that connects Stonehenge to the moon, to Wormwood, to Nibiru. And it's going to do it before Wormwood comes up through our locks, which means when it falls, it won't fall here. That's the plan anyway. It should work well. All right. But, yeah. You know, it was so close. I wanted to say, oh, yes, there's one of our sacred symbols. Look at that. It's the Yunyan. And I said, no, it isn't. I don't have the pictures yet, but it is one of the twists that when you see how the energy currents are supposed to flow, naturally, like the Yun and the Yan and the Yunyan and the rest of them are supposed to flow to build up to the 15 seed atom. This one builds up to the phase-locked 7 heads of the beast compacted seed atom. And I was very disappointed. It has to do with those 2 dots. It does the same thing, but amplified as what's called the Vesica Pisces. A biveca is natural. A Vesica Pisces is not. It implies a phase lock, which implies Merkaba spirals that spin in the same direction instead of in opposite directions. So, unfortunately, that symbol, too. See, there's been such trickery here. Some of our most sacred symbols that we thought were wonderful, that because we thought they meant something, they seem to have power to us. But if we can realize, it wasn't the symbol that had the power for you. It was the fact that you thought it did, and it was your own power. If it comforted you, it was you that were comforting you, but you were projecting it through the image of the symbol. Even if the symbol was meant to reverse your stuff, you might not have known that consciously, and it was still affecting your template. But because of what you assigned to it, you got some of your own energy back, so you actually changed its coding. This was part of the trickery here. They've gotten us to use technologies. They get us to eat foods. They've gotten us to plant things that don't belong here on this planet, that feed the reversals. And we've come to look at it all as part of Earth and part of us, and it's all supposed to be here, and it's all good. And it's such a horrible crash or bubble. Have a really bad day when you realize it's not all sweet and hunky-dory and light and love and pretty flowers, and we can all dance around in circles and sing songs together under the moon, just like the Druids did, and all that fun stuff, right? This is what the New Age movement, the seduction of it, because there's an emotional part of us that always remembered these pieces of things. We used to dance around in circles too. Heck, we did the stands all the time, the right way, spinning, right? You know, we didn't worship the moon. We used the natural currents. Even though it was an artificially created body, there was still a way to draw reflected light of the solar gates from it. If you did it at the right time and the right angles and used your own system the right way, you could pick that 1/3 of the frequencies that were still running the way they were supposed to. So even after the distortions in the grids, there were these things you could do to work around the distortions as long as you had some of your template intact. But at this point in the game, we've got all these activating. We've got the map thing. I mean, the flag thing is really interesting. If I ever have time, I'd like to just go down and say, okay, you put a column here that says, Wisadrak, and a column here that says Anunnaki, yeah, you can do it that way and break it into 4. That gets more complicated, though, because there's alliances and hatreds between certain groups that they work together here and they're on the same agenda, but they really don't like each other, so they actually try to fight each other over here. The easiest way to do it is keep it simple into, I'd say 3 groups, but it'd be pretty hopeless at this point in time. A long time ago, it might have been you could actually find something that looked like an emerald symbol someplace, like a full emerald symbol that wasn't an emerald symbol twisted. Like, for instance, when you see the Star of David, the 6 of Goliath fame, right? You know, even that hasn't escaped. When we use that symbol as a symbol, it always has a circle around it. That circle means it has the base 12 coding and that it's part of the natural Cathara grid. It's actually the symbol, when it has a circle around it, of the gate 12 code. But when you take it by itself, it's an external Merkaba. So there's all these signs and symbols right before our eyes, and they've been like this ever since Atlantis when they took the common knowledge away. It helps to ground the information. We start to realize, gosh, it's right in front of my face. That's the best way, and they knew this. The best way to hide something is to put it right in front of somebody's nose and call it something else. And as long as the people think it's something else, they'll never look for what they think, what they don't think it is. You know, like the HAARP machine, like the lovely crystal glass pyramids over at the Louvre Museum in France, like all sorts of other monuments and edifices, like something I heard about down in Dublin that I haven't seen yet, but I've heard it's pretty interesting. Big and silver and very tall, from what I hear. Nice reception tower. It's all around us. We've just been taught to not see. The information that we get now is teaching us to see. And I kind of, you know, I just keep saying, I wish I could have done this like 40 years earlier. It might have gone better by this point. But maybe this is better. If you think about it, maybe the worst case scenario actually was the cloud with the silver lining, because it turned into the best case scenario, because it allowed the whole thing to get to its final healing point lots faster than it would have otherwise. Can you imagine this drama being dragged out for another 20,000 years, 50,000, 2 billion? No, thank you. You know, I'll get off. Even if I have to go back to space dust, I think I'd take space dust before having to deal with that anymore. You know? So this is the apparatus that is activating in the grids now. And this is what it looks like, what's coming in on our side.